Well, this film is certainly rotten. 2013's Elysium, starring Matt Damon and Jodie Foster, and also Alice Braga and Diego Luna and others. Basically, it's a Matt Damon vehicle, however. It is a 65% on the tomato meter and a 58% on the audience score. It has 162,000 plus audience reviews. This thing, it's chock full of plot holes. It has so many plot holes, it qualifies to be Swiss cheese. Maybe even it's beyond Swiss cheese, but it looks beautiful. The movie looks beautiful. It had a high effects budget, high visual budget. I really liked the way that this film looked in a lot of ways, but I really didn't like jotting down all the plot holes that just pulled me out of the believability. But I'm going to have a lot to say about those plot holes, and I'm also going to say that this is a message film. This film was made to deliver a message. Yes, a straight up political message, and that message is illegal immigrants, they need to be let into the United States because they just need basic human rights to health care. They need health care and they need it now, and you need to open the borders and you need to let them in to get the nice free health care. That's your message, by the way, in case you didn't want to sit through this whole rotten review to get the message, the point of this film. But having said that, let's move into the audience review, shall we? I'm not going to entertain anything above a 3-star review. That's why this is called Rotten Reviews. I want to find out why this is rotten. But look at all those big stars. My gosh, it's almost a whole page of big 5- and 4-star reviews. Finally, we see a 2.5-star review from September 7, 2019, being about 4 months ago. Elysium has a lot of positives, but it was overall let down by the negative message it portrays, and the events in the real world since this movie has been released show perfectly the negative impact and harm of the protagonists are trying to do. If this movie was made 10 years earlier, the protagonists would certainly be the villains of this movie. Wow. They are touching upon that message that I gave you at the very beginning. I gave you clearly what the message of the film is. This reviewer is saying 2.5 stars. I'll say that this, I agree on that. This is a 2.5-star film. It was just visually enough to keep me interested in watching. And although I was slapped in the face by the political messaging, I still found it entertaining enough that I wanted to see how it would all culminate towards some type of conclusion. It had a happy ending, a very much a happy ending, and so you get that at the end of it. But yes, I agree on the 2.5 stars. This reviewer seems to be saying that if it had been made 10 years earlier, the protagonists would have been considered villains of the film. No, I don't think so. They would have been considered the good guys because 10 years ago, the message would have been maybe that, it's the evil corporations are keeping the people down, and Matt Damon and his band of, poor people are going to bring some justice and to the people. They're going to bring down the big bad corporations. But recent events in the last 10 years, more modern events, have brought this to the actual immigration question, and you can see it throughout this film. Let's just say that Matt Damon is pretty much the only white person in Los Angeles. In the year 2054, or excuse me, 2154, you can imagine how much of a population the Los Angeles area would have. It would be staggeringly larger than it is now, and it's already staggeringly large. But in the year 2154, the movie shows that basically Matt Damon's character, he's a white guy, just like I'm a white guy, right? He is the only one such white guy in all of Los Angeles, in that area. That's not exactly believable to me. And it's also unbelievable to me that this character of Max, played by Matt Damon, he is shown to be raised by Spanish speakers. He's been raised by Catholic nuns. All his playmates and his romantic interest are all Spanish speakers, native Spanish speakers. They are largely portrayed as, I guess, they would be of Mexican descent. Now, there's nothing unrealistic about that, something set in 2154, but it's unrealistic that Matt Damon does not speak Spanish natively. He does not have a Latin accent. He speaks American English just like Matt Damon always does. That is not realistic, because if you are raised in a Spanish-speaking environment by Spanish speakers, certainly around Mexican culture, you're not going to be speaking American English like I am. That's what I found just outright ridiculous about this. But the story and the messaging needs to have Matt Damon as the hero who's going to sacrifice himself to save all the Hispanic characters, because he is literally the only white guy in the Los Angeles area that this film shows. That just didn't work for me on a lot of different levels. Forget about the political messaging. It just flat out isn't believable on its face. But let's move on. 1.5 stars, September 2019. Unfortunately, I wasted my time with this one. Forgettable, poorly made, not even entertaining trash. I should have known it would be horrible since it stars Matt Damon. I don't agree with that. Matt Damon's been in a lot of good movies, and this is not trash. This is certainly watchable. It's interesting. It's got an actual interesting premise to it, that the rich have created their own like space station country where they live, and they are running everything down on Earth and using everybody else in their manufacturing schemes, and the Earth is polluted, and their space station utopia is just for the super rich. It's kind of like we've seen this done even back in Judge Dredd, for example. In a lot of different sci-fi and fantasy things, you see this theme. But what makes it so ridiculous and a plot hole for me is that in this futuristic 22nd century, we have robots. It's shown from the very beginning of the film that there are robots completely anatomically like humans and functional, and they are used for military purposes and for police purposes. They are proficient in weapons. You cannot fight them as a human without some type of augmentation. They are like the droids from Star Wars, and they are called droids. They're straight up referred to as droids, and they could be straight up out of Star Wars. However, in this same world in 2154, corporations still need to use humans for manual labor to operate factories to create these droids, to operate industrial machinery. It doesn't make sense. Matt Damon should not be employed in a factory building these droids on an assembly line. He should not be in a factory at all. In fact, that factory would be staffed 100% with these droids. They wouldn't need lunch breaks. They wouldn't need piss breaks. They wouldn't need to complain or join a union. And in fact, this movie shows that it makes a point to show the audience in this film that in the factory that Matt Damon works in, the management is telling them over the speaker system that they are allowed only one bathroom break per shift, and etc. Well, so why aren't they just using these fantastic robots to do all these jobs? They would just need to be recharged. They wouldn't need to go to the bathroom in the first place. So that's one of the many plot holes in this film for me. It just flat out doesn't make sense. Otherwise, the premise is interesting, very interesting to me. I wanted to see what the film would do with that premise, but then it just let me down with all these technological plot holes. This world doesn't need workers like Matt Damon. It doesn't need an underclass to do the dirty work. It has the technology and the robots to do all of this. So that leads me to the second big plot hole in this film. Again, it relates to the technology. It is shown that on this space station that floats around the Earth, it's a utopia, and the rich people have access to these medical pods that can make them immortal, that can fix any disease or any injury they have just by laying in the machine and going through a simple, maybe it's a 1 minute at the most process to rejuvenate your body. And you can actually have a character with his head blown most all of the way off, and the machine will just regenerate his face, his skull, everything, and he'll look even better than he did before. So why can't these machines be used on Earth? Like, what point is there to just have these machines on the space station and the general public and the workforce has no access to them? It doesn't make sense, because even from the perspective of a giant big bad corporation that wants to use people for cheap labor, why wouldn't they want this technology used on their workforce? I mean, you can get the laborers back to work in no time when they suffer injuries, and yet in this film, Matt Damon injures himself on the job in his factory work, and the corporation just discards him like trash. That makes no sense. Why wouldn't they just have a medical pod that they could put him into and then give him one single piss break and get him right back to work? So just from a capitalist factory owner point of view, it doesn't make sense to have only the medical pods used for the rich people on the space station. And furthermore, it's shown in this film that you just cannot get access to these medical pods. If you're somebody living on Earth and you just cobble together the resources to pay your way into getting access to a medical pod, you can't do that. These medical pods are exclusively reserved for the rich on the space station. It isn't like you can just save up or get a loan and get access to one on Earth. You can't. And that's another big problem of this. It just doesn't economically make sense, a lot of this technology in a lot of ways. It just blows. I mean, it's full of plot holes, just full of it. And that just blows away all of my believability in the rest of the story. And that's why it was so disappointing to me. I really wanted to see this work. I wanted to see a story that would show me something new, a new perspective on, how the rich are living on this utopian space station and whatnot. But this movie had so many plot holes, I just couldn't believe all of this would be plausible, But let's move on. I'm hoping to find some of this in these audience reviews because this is a big problem. This thing's got like plot holes up its ass. 1.5 stars. Unfortunately, I wasted my time for this one. I read that one before, so let's move on. Wow, big reviews there. 0.5 star, June 8, 2019. So that's not English. 1 star from June. Can you imagine the shithole they're going to turn Elysium into after the end? Ha ha ha. I'm not. Oh, I see where they're going. At the end of this film, it's shown that Matt Damon, he wins and he is able to make everybody on Earth a citizen of Elysium, so they can all get medical treatment at the end. And at the end, all of these robotic medical droids come down from the space station and they visit the Earth and start passing out free medical care to all the brown peoples. And so they're saying, this reviewer, that can you imagine how trashed everything will be after all these poor people get their hands on Elysium? Well, maybe, maybe not, but I can see how the woke messaging here really rubs people the wrong way, and I don't blame them for that. 3 stars, June 1, 2019. I love the action sequence and graphics are amazing, but the voice of the supposed bad was distracting. I could not stop laughing. Well, that brings me to something. Jodie Foster plays this villain, this defense, I don't know, she's the Secretary of Defense on the space station. She's in charge of defending it. She's in charge of the security. And she's a villain. And Jodie Foster, she looks like somebody that spends all of her time working out at the gym. Really, watch it and see. And she's very evil and over the top. And her dialogue just goes a little bit over the top and is off-putting and not believable. She's like a cartoon villain character. And I agree with the reviewer on that. It's hard to watch her say all and do all this stuff because she's just like a very cartoon villain, 0.5 star, May 23rd, 2019. The political overtones are unbearable. Well, I wouldn't call these political overtones. I would call this just like punching you right in the face with modern politics about immigration. And yeah, it's not just an overtone. I'm sorry. Your brain is like just a block of cement if you call this an overtone. This is just flat out punching you in the face. I mean, really, Matt Damon is the only white guy in all of Los Angeles, and all of the white people on the space station are evil, and they're the bad guys. And The immigrants, there are immigrants that are all like what you would expect immigrants in modern Los Angeles to look like. They are mostly Hispanic, some are Asian, and they're all trying to flee in these immigrant caravans to the Elysium space station so that they can run to these medical pods. And they've got coyotes that are basically taking them on these shuttles up to Elysium. I'm sorry, but if you think that's just a political overtone, like something subtle that the director was trying to give to you, you just got hit in the face by a brick and don't realize it. But let's move on. 2.5 stars, May 6, 2019. Neil Blomkamp is an extremely talented and versatile writer, director who made a noble effort producing this dark science fiction harbinger. Like District 9, his earlier movie, Elysium perhaps draws heavily on his early upbringing in South Africa during the apartheid years, incapably touching on themes of exploitation, oppression, and hardship, all bet in a science fiction vernacular. However, there were too many parallels and stereotypes, in particular of South African Afrikaners. As yeah, this film features characters that were in District 9. They are South African Afrikaner characters speaking with that dialect of English and using terminology from Afrikaans speech, and they are the bad guys. They are mercenaries. They have no absolutely no feelings. They have no remorse for what they do to the poor immigrant brown peoples in Los Angeles and etc. And they're all white, of course, and they were co-stars and stars of District 9, and they are straight up the white villain bad guy mercenaries, and you can tell that this director brought them on board. Now, the problem here is that this isn't just like some kind of subtle message about race relations. This is straight up saying that, immigrants, they're illegal immigrants, but they must be allowed to come across the border to get free health care. That's what this is. That's what this is. There's no question about it. District 9 was a lot more subtle. And, I saw District 9 in the movie theater when it came out. I enjoyed it. I don't think it's a rotten film, but you could tell it had a subtle messaging there. To me, that was subtle. This one is not. This is straight up just punching you in the face with the messaging. And it's not believable. It just creates so many unbelievable plot holes. I had it on my list about the South African stuff. They're using terminology from South Africa, and it's not believable. Like, I didn't know what they meant. I mean, I guess they were using epithets and whatnot that were South African, and the villain mercenary does a lot of that, and I kind of wanted to consult some kind of dictionary to find out what he was saying sometimes, although I got the point that he was using some kind of exclamations that Americans just aren't familiar with. Now I have in my message, not my messaging, I have in my notes some problems with this. It is 2154, and you have a lot of visual effects budgeting, but you see straight up old junk 1980s and 90s cars all over the roads. Really? After 2 centuries have gone by, you would have these cars still out there looking all junky but being drivable? I'm sorry. That makes no sense. Really, cars weren't produced since 1985 until 2154. I don't get it, because the budget was really high for showing a lot of things, really a lot of cool visual stuff in this movie, and yet at the same time they just had to put old junk cars from the 1980s into Los Angeles. Everybody's driving those around. I don't get it. Let's move on. 2.5 stars. Not a bad movie, but other than a known cast, it doesn't do enough to stand out from all the other dystopian movies that are out there. Yeah, I'll say it just doesn't stand out in any way except that it's just hitting you right in the face with the PC messaging, the wokeness. Now, what's on my list? I've got a lot of plot holes. In fact, almost every criticism on my list that I wrote down while watching this is a plot hole, directly a plot hole. Let's see. Yeah, how come the robots don't man the factories? Yes. How come machines in the factories, like industrial machines, don't have safety cutoffs or anything like that? They do. They always have. So that's a fail. Matt Damon is the only white guy in Los Angeles. and I mentioned that before. But then also, he's the only white guy walking around Los Angeles with crowds of Hispanics and Asians, and yet nobody notices that he's the only white guy, and they treat him like just one of the people, despite the fact that he's speaking English and he doesn't speak native Spanish, and he sticks out like a sore thumb. And come on, that's not realistic, is it? If you think it is, go ahead and walk around areas of Southern California that you're the only white guy there and see if nobody notices you and everything's just fine. It doesn't work like that, and it doesn't work like that for me in this film. Let's see. Yeah, old cars from the 1980s, Jodie Foster overacting. Yeah, the boss, the mercenary boss, he's got access to power armor, some advanced power armor that makes him super strong and everything. We've seen this type of power armor before in a lot of stuff. Matt Damon has a really older version of the power armor, an obsolete version that's very much almost like a junky version. And he's got no fighting skills. He's not this mercenary hired killer. The bad guy is. They have their kind of, big climactic battle at the end, and Matt Damon is able to quite easily defeat the mercenary guy and kill him off. It's not realistic, I'm sorry. He was outmatched in every way. He's not a professional mercenary. He's just a lowly factory worker, and not a very smart one by his own admission. But he defeats a lifelong professional hired mercenary that's got all this upgraded weaponry, and he's been doing this for decades. But Matt Damon, the lowly factory worker, defeats him with some junky power armor. I'm sorry, it didn't work for me. It's just way out there. It's a plot problem. Let's move through to another page of audience reviews and find out if other people had problems with the plot. 1.5 stars. Much like District 9, Blomkamp seems more interested in letting political messages get in the way of a plausible story. I enjoy Charlotte Copley's performance in the role, but this film overall just doesn't do it for me, and the ending is so in your face it's truly laughable. Well, the ending just kind of shows you that the whole thing's ridiculous, because if the robots can just come down and bring the medical pods and start giving out free healthcare to everybody on Earth, why wasn't this just a thing on Earth? Like, what economic advantage is it to the rich to not have people on Earth be healthy, even for a price? Why wouldn't it just be a thing where if you saved up your money, you could get access to this medical technology on Earth? It doesn't make any sense, and the ending just shows you how dumb it really is. And it's also ridiculous, like, okay, Elysium is a space station with presumably a finite number of droids and a finite number of medical pods. Yeah, but the Earth has billions in population, so at what point are the medical pods going to be overwhelmed? You would presumably, it would take you a century to get to everybody with just a handful of medical pods. So why aren't medical pods in high production? I don't know. A whole lot of this just doesn't make any sense, and it's ridiculous at the end. 1.5 stars. This was on Damon's lowest rated movies. Nothing about this made sense. Basically, Americans are bad, immigrants are good. I just don't understand how you can portray the immigrants as good guys when literally all but 2 of the main characters are criminals. Then Jodie Foster, why was she there? And why was she talking like she had 3 conflicting personalities from 3 different countries fighting for the chance to speak? The French dude was random, like when he stabbed Foster, why? Yeah, the movie couldn't make up its mind what language people were supposed to be fluent in. Like I said, it didn't make sense that Matt Damon wouldn't be a Spanish speaker. Yet people were speaking Spanish all around him, and he grew up in that environment. And it didn't make sense. Yes, Jodie Foster had kind of an accent that came and went, and I wasn't sure if she was supposed to be South African or she was supposed to be American. And, we're in 2154, so with the technology they show, we shouldn't be having all these regional accents. I mean, it's the same problem with Star Trek. You shouldn't have these regional accents be such a prominent thing when the technology suggests that we're kind of all mixed together now, physically and culturally. So it doesn't make a lot of sense. And I'll say, what's particularly bizarre to me is this movie is supposed to be woke. It's supposed to give you a message, but at the same time, it's got weird product placement in it. It has straight up, it shows these space shuttles going and taking these, they're like coyote shuttles, taking immigrants illegally up to the space station. And when they hit zero G, you know what's floating around inside these space shuttles? Bottles of Mexican beer. Corona bottles, Dos Equis bottles, and etc. There's several different brands floating around, empty ones inside these shuttles. So the movie's like trying to tell you that the immigrants, these presumably Mexican immigrants, spent all their time drinking beer while they were on their way to the space station. And I know that's not what the director was trying to do, but this weird product placement just made the movie come off like that to me. And I actually laughed out loud at the empty Mexican beer bottles floating around in all of these shuttles on their way to the space station. Wow, wow, wow. I don't know why nobody else caught that, but I just like burst out laughing because, I'm seeing a woke movie. It's definitely trying to give me this message about immigration, but at the same time, it's saying that the immigrants are basically obsessed with drinking beer, like it's stereotyping them basically by this product placement. Wow, wow, wow. 2 stars, November 22nd, 2018. I'm sorry, I just really don't like this movie. Well, I don't really like it either because just too many plot holes. 1 star, September 10, 2018. Maybe if those people on Earth didn't vote Democrat, they wouldn't be living in such shitholes. At least Hillary died in the end. So they're saying they're thinking that Jodie Foster's character was supposed to be a stand-in for Hillary Clinton. You know why I didn't think of that? You're right, it could be, I guess, but it didn't come across to me like that because I don't find Hillary Clinton attractive physically in any way. And so, Jodie Foster, she had a very nice body in this film. Like it showed you that she spends a lot of time working out to keep her body nice. And Hillary Clinton does not give me that same image at all. And so that's why that I didn't make that connection mentally. But I could see that, yeah, maybe the director thought that was supposed to be an evil version of Hillary Clinton up there on the space station. But okay, maybe. Should I do one more page? Why not? I might laugh. Who knows? 1 star, preachy, derivative, boring. 3 stars, what binds all the mayhem? Elysium is a plot-driven sci-fi thriller with a familiar theme that we have always been fed with for years, but with a newer perspective which is appreciative since it is more humane than we asked for. This guy's not saying a whole lot of anything, so I'm going to move on. 2 stars, July 28, 2018. I was offended by the race war and white savior crap. All the space Nazis must have been busy doing Star Wars because this had space South African baddies a la Lethal Weapon. When the main baddie got his face blown off, I thought, oh good, at least we don't have this stupid showdown at the end. Oops, wrong. And what was Jodie Foster doing in this? Was she supposed to be channeling Marie Le Pen or something? I couldn't tell if that was an accent or she had a stroke. Yeah, there's been more than one reviewer commenting that you can't tell what accent Jodie Foster's character was supposed to have exactly. Yeah, I kind of wanted the bad guy mercenary to die too, but nope, he was revived with one of the medical pods, and his face actually looked better than it did before. So to me, that's a moneymaker, Why didn't they sell the medical pods to the vain people on Earth so they could just like look beautiful forever? I don't know. It's a plot hole, right? 3 stars. Neil Blomkamp's Elysium is a good science fiction film which has a lot of social commentary themes going on, like his previous endeavor, District 9. In this instance, it is a look at the economic injustices that he decides to play out. The film is set on a space station, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, it is definitely a political message, but there's nothing subtle about it. District 9, it was far more subtle than this. 1 star. The trailers for Elysium never intrigued me, but I enjoyed District 9. I love Matt Damon and Jodie Foster, and Rotten Tomatoes indicated that it was a fresh movie, so my son and I gave it a shot in IMAX. Apparently, I should have gone with my gut or at least read the reviews, especially some of those specifically considered fresh. This movie was awful. Elysium is an extraordinarily beautiful looking film. Blomkamp does as good of a job in this as he did in District 9 in painting a realistic world. Well, yeah, visually it looks fantastic. It looks real. I really liked the way it looked. But plot-wise, it was completely ridiculous. So many plot holes, I couldn't get my head around all of it. Now, this reviewer saying this was fresh on Rotten Tomatoes at one time, well, it's still fresh on the critics' reviews, just barely. But maybe back in time in 2018, the audience score was better too. I don't know. This certainly, if this were fresh, I wouldn't be doing a rotten review, or at least it would be a contrarian rotten review, but this is straight up rotten. 2.5 stars, June 16, 2018. Movie has a SJW theme. Why are people on Earth entitled to Elysium? It doesn't belong to them. This movie mirrors the degenerate left in American politics way too much to be enjoyable. Well, yeah, I'm going to say, yes, this is a woke movie. It's got an social justice theme right in your face. But yeah, why are the people on Earth entitled to go to Elysium? Well, why are illegal aliens from south of the U.S. border entitled to come across the border illegally? And why are they entitled to clog up our hospital rooms in Texas and California and Arizona? You know, I don't know. If you can find the answer to that question, then you can find the answer in this movie, because they are directly correlated. I'm going to say it. They just are. And so I'm going to call this one Elysium. For me, the reason why it deserves to be rotten is because it has way too many plot holes. It doesn't make sense. Now, is the political messaging also a factor? For me, it's an annoying factor, but if the plot holes had been fixed, I would have gone along with the ride anyway. But 65% on the tomato meter. I think, this deserves to be rotten. Just, like it is, 58%. And I think the critics, they probably responded to the political messaging, and that's why the critics didn't consider this rotten, because a lot of films with plot holes like this, the critics just rip the crap out of them. So I'm going to say the only reason it's got 65 on the tomato meter is because it does have the SJW theme going on, quite heavy. But yes, if you're willing to suspend your sense of logic, and you just want the visuals and you want something interesting and different, go ahead and watch this. But logically, it's just completely ridiculous. And I am going to see you on another episode of Rotten Reviews.